Decide what you stand for, and then stand for it all the time. Clayton Christensen, a great man, once said these words. He cared deeply about living a full and meaningful life and spent much of his encouraging others to do the same. We lost this great man in 2020. One of Clayton's most impactful teachings revolved around a question: how will you measure your life? Deciding what you stand for and then standing for it all the time isn't easy. It requires a level of purpose that can be difficult to sustain, but when you see a person living an intentional life, it resonates. When I think of impact, I think of my grandpa Betts. I was 14 the night he picked me up to haul hay. He'd spent the day building a sewing room for Grandma. He was tall, lean, alive. We talked a lot that night, lifting bale after bale. I had to tilt my head to the sky to see his face and toothy smile. There was always a piece of straw between his teeth, always fresh. Most days were spent in a granary off Main Street, most nights at the farm, managing water. Back then, we talked about water, when it was getting in, who would help it along, how we'd survive until it came back. He never seemed satisfied with how those conversations went, but his crooked smile underneath his crooked hat never faded. Only thing complaining does is make a bluebird turn yellow, he'd say. It was hard to argue when he put it like that. The town wasn't a city yet. He'd drive his old Chevy down the road slow, stopping to drop a bag of potatoes or corn on a neighbor's porch. Children ran to greet him, calling out his name. Parents were sure to let him know they'd be happy to pay, but he laughed off their absurd offers. Hugs and firm handshakes, this type of thing could go on all night. He saved our house for last. Sometimes Grandma would come along and there'd be an extra bounce in his step. He'd ignore the stern warnings from Mom about not getting us too wound up, but then again, he never got in trouble. We were sad every time he left, even Mom. He never talked about the president or the stories of people he didn't know that he'd read about in the news. He only wanted to talk family, fishing, and who needed help. That and water. There was never enough water. I wasn't one to jump at the opportunity to haul hay. He'd stopped by while the Nintendo 64 was burning up from playing GoldenEye all day. Mom said to turn it off and do house chores, or go to the farm with Grandpa. Those were my choices. When he dropped me off back home after the sun faded, I got out of his old Chevy and heard him say, "I'll be by tomorrow night with some fish and biscuits. Then we'll fill our bellies like the kings of old and never want for anything again." He died the next day in a car accident on his way home from fishing. Dad and I went to the crash site to look things over and found his wallet. We brought it back to Grandma. The whole town showed up for his funeral, where the local VFW did the honors. Everyone knew his name. I want to be more like my grandpa. And I know I have that opportunity. For the most part, I determine who I'm being, the impact I have, and the life I live. but I often forget I have that power. It's so easy to forget. As the great Clayton Christensen once said, if the decisions you make about where you invest your blood, sweat, and tears are not consistent with the person you aspire to be, you'll never become that person.